Media. It really feels like she's in a much better place than she was when she was working with Luthen.
You're listening to
Path of the Jedi.
with your host, Ronnie Cruz.
All right, welcome to Path of the Jedi, the podcast where Star Wars meets personal development. My name is Ronnie Cruz, your host for this urgent adventure. That's right, urgent adventure. Well, a couple of reasons. Urgent for me, because I really want to work diligently to get this episode recorded and released on time. The recording part is really the hardest part with the issues of concentration and focus. But given that I was so late last week, I really want to do my best to get it done and get it out for you on time this week. Also, I do have to thank you. I want to express my gratitude for your understanding in allowing me to release last week's episode super late. I mean, it was a full 2 days late. So I really, really appreciate you giving me grace in my own inability to release my show on time. So thank you so much. Urgent also because everything in the episode that we're going to talk about today, Andor episode 7, it seems to be super urgent, right? Like things are escalating very, very quickly. The occupation of Gorman, Yavin is now a full-on base, and they're starting to recruit more and organize, really, really creating a full-fledged rebellion. And the same thing with the ISB, right? The same thing with the Imperial presence on Gorman. They're really ratcheting up the presence there, and in a matter of 48-hour standard time in Star Wars, the planet's going to be fully militarized, and it's going to be martial law so that they can force everybody to relocate and then extract what they need to extract from the planet. So really, really urgent. Like there's, I really feel like after watching this episode that a lot is going to happen in this next block of episodes in this particular chapter in the story. So yeah, super urgent. There's this sense of urgency in the air with everybody across the board, with the rebellion ratcheting up, and it's now actually a full-fledged organized rebellion with things on Gorman, with the Imperial presence ratcheting up on Gorman, and with even just everybody's individual involvement in whatever side they're on, right? Even Cyril, right? There seems to be this urgency between Cyril and Dedra, and what's about to take place here in the next couple of days and on Gorman. So yeah, very, very urgent. At least I feel like things are very, very urgent. Now, before I go on, I do want to let you know, in case you hear what might sound like static in the background, that's rain. It just started raining. The sky just opened up. In fact, you might hear thunder during this recording. And it literally started exactly when I pressed record. Of course, right? It's my luck. Hopefully my microphone and the noise canceling capabilities will take most of that out. But if you do hear what again sounds like static, let's just chalk it up to background ambiance, sounds of nature. Sounds of nature. So I appreciate your patience and understanding with that. Okay, so because there is a little bit of urgency in today's situation, self-imposed anyways, I want to go ahead and get into the theme for today's episode. We're going to be talking about Andor Season 2, Episode 7, Messenger. Now, again, if you haven't watched this particular episode of Andor yet, I encourage you to go ahead and please press pause on the podcast and go watch that episode so that nothing gets spoiled. I don't want to be the reason why the show, or this episode at least, gets ruined for you. So go ahead and take the time to watch that episode of Andor, and then come back to Path of the Jedi when you're done.
I'm going in. Cover me, Porkins.
Okay, we're back. So the theme that kept jumping out at me in this episode is the theme of healing. Now, I realize that may not necessarily be the theme for the overall episode as a whole, but I think it plays a crucial role for a lot of the key players in this show. I mean, it opens up with Cassian having an injury that just won't heal, and we see through the course of the episode what he has to do in order to facilitate moving on from that particular injury. This theme also applies, I think, to Vel, who we see towards the end of the episode, and I really feel like she's in a much better place now than she was in the previous year with the other story arc, with the other three episode story arc. Obviously, you can't get any worse than losing a loved one, like she lost Cinta. But I think in parting ways with Luthen and in joining the rebellion, she's kind of stopped the cycle of risk and danger and sacrifice that she was stuck in. I mean, it was a loop of constant trauma, basically. And not to say that she's fully recovered from that particular trauma. The healing process is exactly that. It's a process. However, the very fact that she's on this healing journey, I think, has given her at least a little bit more clarity than before, a little bit more sense of purpose. Again, it really feels like she's in a much better place than she was when she was working with Luthen. Now, in Vel's case, we're talking more about healing from a mental and emotional trauma, and not so much a physical trauma. But at this point in the conversation, I do want to pose the question, are those things actually different? Are they separate from each other? Is a mental emotional trauma separate from physical trauma, or are they somehow intertwined and connected? After all, an injury, certainly a very serious injury, will have an impact on your mental and emotional health, and vice versa. I think we've all seen how our mental and emotional health impacts our physical well-being. An easy and almost, I would say, universal example of the connectedness of our mental states with our physical states is the feeling of irritability when we're hungry. It's so common, in fact, that in English we created a term for it, albeit slang, but we created the term hangry just for this very specific condition. Now, I know that's pretty minor, right? It's pretty low on the scale of seriousness and severity. However, I think it really clearly draws the connection, or illustrates that there is a connection between our mental well-being and our physical well-being. Going back to Cassian, I think this is exactly what's happening to him. I haven't done a ton of research on this, but I've heard from multiple reliable sources, credible sources, for many years now, that unresolved trauma can and often does manifest itself in your body as illness, as dis-ease, in one form of malady or another. In Cassian's case, it took the form of a blaster wound on his shoulder that refused to heal. And we know this because it seems that they have already pretty much tried everything physically to fix him, and nothing seems to have worked. And it wasn't until he went and saw the Force healer that the wound actually started to heal. Now, this interaction with the Force healer was a really, really interesting one, and I think is at the center of our discussion today on healing. Firstly, she thanks him for bringing her clarity. I find that absolutely fascinating. We talked about clarity with Vel earlier, and I think this really ties in. I believe that this Force healer, and I should have looked up her name, but anyways, we're just going to keep going with our discussion. I believe that because of all this uncertainty that they're all facing right now, especially on this base on Yavin, um, uh, there is a lot of things that aren't clear, and perhaps there's a lot of questions as to whether or not they were doing the right thing in the first place, especially her. Whether or not as a Force healer she was actually helping people. And I think her interaction with Cassian, um, and sensing, at the very least, sensing his certainty and assuredness. I think, sensing that from Cassian, the clarity that she received was a clarity of purpose, that she was in fact doing the right thing, and was fighting for a worthy cause. Speaking in more general terms, I think when you are carrying around the weight and burden of unresolved trauma, it can feel like you're living with a veil over your eyes, right? Like you're wading through this thick fog. You expend all your mental and emotional bandwidth on carrying and reliving those traumas, that it's really hard to focus and put energy on anything else. It's not until you start working to address those unresolved traumas, that burden and that weight starts to lift, and the fog with it. This is the type of clarity I think that Vel is experiencing right now. I mean, in previous episodes, it seemed that she was always tense, under a lot of pressure, of course, and those high stress environments, those high risk environments, and of course everything that she was exposing herself to trauma wise. Now, she seems much more centered and much more grounded, and definitely much more well adjusted than she was before. So that was the first interesting thing about the interaction with the Force Healer that Cassian had, the whole clarity, the fact that she said he brought her clarity. The next thing is in her conversation with Bix, when she tells Bix that Cassian is different than most people. Most people hold on and live in the past, hold on to and live in the past, whereas Cassian, he just kind of collects and gathers things as he goes. I don't necessarily disagree with that. However, I mean, in the case of his injury, it seems that Cassian is very much still holding on to something in the past, right? And part of it, obviously is displayed in his unwillingness to even talk to the Force Healer in the first place. We can infer that there must have been some past experience, presumably with Marva, or involving Marva, that has caused Cassian to not trust the Force Healers, or any Force Healer for that matter. My point is, clearly Cassian is holding on to something from the past. I mean, I think actually he's holding on to a lot of things from his past, which then, in the context of what the Force Healer says about him gathering things as he goes, makes perfect sense. When you look at all the things that Cassian has experienced in his life, it makes perfect sense that he is the way he is. What might on the surface seem like incredible resilience is actually trauma response. He's fiercely independent and incredibly self reliant. He doesn't depend on anybody else, right? He says, the second I can't come and go freely is the second I'm gone, right? He's also actually super cagey, right? I don't know if you picked up on that, but he only allows a few people close. Everybody else he keeps at a very distant arm's length. All of these qualities, all of these traits are trauma responses, right? They're the coping mechanisms and the defense mechanisms of an individual who has experienced trauma pretty much his entire life. So the Force user is absolutely right about Cassian. He has collected and gathered things along the way, and it's all meant for something, right? It's all meant it all has a greater purpose. Everything that Cassian has gone through, all the traumas and all the challenges, the difficulties that he's experienced in his life, have made him who he is, and who he is somebody of high value to everybody, right? To the Empire, he's a high value target. To the rebellion, he's a high value operative. The only problem is, the longer these things go unresolved, the more of a toll it takes on Cassian. Yes, they may have served him in the past, as all trauma response does. However, Cassian has built such a thick, impenetrable, protective wall around himself that he doesn't even know to accept help when he needs it. And in this case, he definitely needs it. His traumas are manifesting themselves physically. In this particular case, the persistent blaster wound on his shoulder. And this is why Bix is so adamant about him just letting it in, is what she says. I think just accept what the Force Healer has told you, and allow yourself to get help, basically. And this is the part of the conversation where I get off the bus. I get off the bus on this one. I have no answers. I have no answers. I know I chose this theme of healing for this episode because that's what jumped out at me. But in this conversation of healing, I am Cassian. I understand Cassian all too well in this situation. His fierce independence and self reliance stemming from abandonment and neglect. Remember, he was an orphan even before Marva picked him up. His caginess and keeping people at a distance stems from not wanting to be hurt, and not wanting to get too close to people for fear of losing them. getting beat on as much as Cassian has in his life, you're pretty much in a constant state of survival. And you get really good at fending for yourself to the point where you feel like you can't and don't need to count on anybody else. But the reality is, he can't do it alone. This becomes really, really apparent by the time we get to Rogue One. So, like I said, I don't have any answers in this conversation of healing. I'm not a therapist. I'm not an expert on trauma. I'm definitely not a doctor or a psychologist, psychiatrist. But if there's any advice I can impart to you in this episode, it is to seek help. I totally understand that you may feel like you need to protect yourself or that you can tough it out and do it on your own. But really, you don't need to. Whatever the burden is that you're carrying, you can't shoulder it forever. It will take its toll. So reach out, find the help that you need, and as Bick said to Cassian, let it in. It can only be good. And that's the episode. That's the episode. An episode on healing, in which I have no answers. I have no answers because it's a process, and I am in that process myself, right? I think I've talked about it enough times on this show for you to know that I am experiencing. Well, I mean, even in my speech patterns, you can tell that my focus and my concentration and my thoughts are I'm really, it really takes a lot of effort to wrangle them in and speak fluidly, right? So yeah. I mean, it's just been constant work recently. I've been managing depression my entire life, really, and when I became aware of it, is part of the reason that I devoted so much energy and time to personal development and learning more about human behavior and human psychology. Yes, it has served me very well as a mentor and a coach, and that was also another reason for doing that and learning all these things. But primarily it was for my own journey, right? It was for my own journey of healing, and recently it's just gotten tougher and tougher, and what I thought I could do on my own, I realize I can't. I no longer can. And thankfully, I have people in my life that have really encouraged me to take the steps to get help. More than anything, this episode is for me. But hopefully, if you're listening to this and you are in a place in your life where you just can't shoulder the burden anymore, get help. Get help. I encourage you to get help. I'm very well, yeah, I'm taking those steps. I was going to say I'm very close to taking those steps, but no, I am taking those steps. I have reached out to, I've initiated the process of seeing professional help. And I encourage you to do the same. Like for my generation, it was definitely stigmatized, but we're way past that. And at this point, if you're in a state of being where you just feel horrible all the time, I mean, who cares about the stigmas, right? Who cares what other people think? Like if you're miserable, so go seek help. I can't say that enough. And again, it really is. I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to you. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope it made sense in the context of this particular episode of Andor, because it was screaming to me that this was an episode about healing. Anywho, let's move on to the shout out. Okay, so this week's shout out goes to Rowena Cruz, my sister. I've given her shout outs, I think, before in the past, but I especially wanted to give her a shout out for this week and this particular episode, because she has been nothing but supportive in this whole entire journey for me. Especially in encouraging me to reach out for help. She's been kind of like Bix in that regard. and has really just encouraged me to seek out the help that I need. And it's not really in like a forceful way or a coercive way or anything like that. She's just like, okay, did you call or did you email? Did you reach out? Just checking in, just like nudges, really, nudges and support. Even if I, as long as I drag my heels, right? Even on the days where I was like, no, I didn't do it yet. I didn't do it yet. She was still very, very supportive in that, because I mean, she's been one person that really understands, at the very least, has seen, how difficult a time it can be for me. So I just really wanted to take this moment, this week, this episode, to shine the light on her, and because not only does she have to deal with my insanity, but she has to deal with everything else in her own life, and so I know that added burden can't be easy. So I just want to dedicate this particular episode to her. So if you're listening, sis, and I know you are, this week's shout out goes to you. All right, so last thing before we go, if you're not already following the show, please hit that plus button on top of whatever app you happen to be listening on. And if you're listening on the YouTube version, just hit that subscribe button. Following the show is really the best thing you can do to help us grow. Every new follower will doesn't register, but the algorithm sees that more people are following the show. So the more people follow the show, the more the algorithm pushes it out to other people. So please, if you're not already following the show, go ahead and follow the show. And then the next best thing you can do to help us grow is by sharing it. If you heard anything in this episode that you think might be helpful to somebody in your life, or if you think they might appreciate it, please share it. Especially this episode where the message is to get help. It's really important. It really is very, very important. So if there's somebody that you think this message can resonate with, share it with them. It takes 3 to 5 seconds. You click that share button, put there, copy the link or whatever, and you're off to the races. But again, I think beyond helping us grow the show here, you could potentially really be helping somebody out in a very big way with these conversations and these discussions we have on the show.
Classified, really? Me too. Big secret.
Lastly, I do want to say again that I'm not a professional therapist. I'm not certified in any of this stuff. I'm a certified personal development coach, but that doesn't qualify me to help you with things like some of the stuff we talked about, right? Like seeking out help. So if you're in a bad way and you really are having a hard time handling and coping right now, seek help. Seek professional help. There's so much help you can get from therapy. You can do it online, via Zoom. There's obviously psychiatric help. There's clinical help that you can get. But the main thing is just seek help, right? Seek help. You're not alone in this thing, and you don't need to carry this burden by yourself. So beyond listening to this show, if you need help, go out there and seek help. And I will leave a link to a website actually that I'm using right now. That was shared with me by my acupuncturist, and that will give you the resources and where you can find therapists and doctors, clinicians in your area, and you can look at their profiles and kind of vet them that way before you reach out. So yeah, I mean, main thing is again, I'm not a professional, but if you need a professional, I encourage you to go out and seek help.
Trust goes both ways.
Okay, so that's gonna do it for this week. We got it out on time. And there was no small effort. I will tell you that it was no small effort. But I'm glad to be here with you. I'm glad I got it done, and I'm glad you're listening to this show. We will, there's more to come as always. We've got let's see. 5 more episodes of Andor to go. So we're going to be talking about Andor Season 2, Episode 8 next week. So until then, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and may the Force be with you.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company nor Lucasfilm Limited and is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names and sounds and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is intellectual property of Path of the Jedi unless otherwise indicated.